Done with playing with this. Up front, this is long and probably way too detailed for anyone other than those who are suffering from insomnia. My apologies for that, however, even if no one reads this, just writing it out served as some therapy for me. I realize this is pretty tame, but still serious to me as I try to determine if my open and honest relationship is real. I have an amazing relationship with my new wife of close to 6 years now. This relationship is completely different for both of us compared to previous relationships and a previous marriage for both of us. From the beginning, we have been determined to have complete honesty with each other regardless of the good, bad, or ugly of a situation. She has shared difficult details of her past and shared things that have happened since we met that made me feel greatly confident of that openness and honesty, yet here I am. I am trying to decide if something happened on a business trip that took place about 2 years ago. I had put the questions behind me until some photos turned up from a push of all our various device photos to the Amazon Photo Cloud service. It was enough to make me start digging and trying to determine if I am just letting my imagination get the best of me or if she is not quite as honest and open as I thought. I just want to make a determination one way or another. I just have this compelling need to know. I went back to old texts and pictures to try to piece this together. My wife went on a business trip in California. We both travel for business and like to keep in touch via text during our travels. We also like to tease each other a bit about situations that normally occur during travel. Sophia is an extremely attractive and intelligent woman, and often gets hit on by men. She tells me when this happens, and we laugh about the situations. She is in a sales role for her company, and it is standard procedure for me to ask and receive a picture of how she is dressed for the day or dinner meetings she might have. At this meeting, she set up her company booth, working alone for the company at this conference, and was soon meeting with many physicians to talk about her product. During the first day of travel, setup, and meetings, she sent me several pictures of herself. She always looked very professional and very good at the same time. Pictures of competitors' products and booths, text discussions of who she was meeting and how they might be useful to her company, etc. There was a reception later the first day. She got back to her room at 1 a.m. and I did not receive any texts that I would normally get while she was out, but wanting to stay connected to me. She does not drink much and is not a party type of person. She is quite serious by nature. The next day she met a highly rated physician and successful international businessman that was a perfect fit for her company product and perhaps even an advisory board role for them. He invited her to lunch to discuss further. After a 2-hour lunch, she was practically gushing to me regarding his credentials and was excited that she might be landing a very prominent candidate for the company. There was another reception that night at 6 p.m. I received one text saying things were going very well and that she was bonding. She texted at 1 a.m. that she was heading back to her room and would call. It took quite some time for her to call though. She described the physician as a wonderful soul and that he invited her to dinner the next night. The next day the physician stopped by her booth and said he had made reservations for 6 p.m. She was still gushing about his credentials on that day, and to be fair, he would make a great addition to the company. They went to a nice place for dinner. She did not send me any pictures of herself before going to dinner, as she normally would, and only sent a TripAdvisor link to the restaurant they were going to. I was getting curious about this new friend and asked for a picture if she could without it being awkward. She did not send any, however later I found a picture he sent her of the two of them at the restaurant standing side by side, her nestled into him with his arm around her. Dinner was around 9 p.m., no texts or pictures, only a text at 12:20 a.m. saying she was heading back to hotel and would call me. If my memory serves me correctly, there was a long delay and she finally called at 1:30 a.m. saying he wanted to have another drink with her at the hotel. There was a goodnight kiss and hug, because the next day she referenced the one she received as bigger and longer than the night before. I received a good morning avatar the next morning, told me she had plans to have coffee with him at 10:30 a.m. The company was planning for her to go to another similar conference in Florida in a couple of weeks since she had so much success at this one. The physician was going to be at that one also since it was near his hometown. He was leaving town that day, and they met again for a 2-hour lunch where they had a glass of wine. She rarely drinks wine during the day. When I teased her regarding if she received a goodbye kiss, humor was my way of trying to find out what was happening. She replied by text saying yes, big hug and kisses, and that he was excited about her coming to Florida. I pressed her about the extent of the kisses. She just said bigger and longer than the other ones. I asked if this was open lip. She replied no, and then no longer wanted to discuss it and left to take a walk, effectively closing the discussion. I pushed back on the trip to Florida and we had a big argument by phone and text. I told her I was concerned not that she had so many meeting with him, but that she was meeting with him exclusively, and that the lunches and dinners were 4-hour ordeals. Also, I asked why I never received any pictures of how she dressed for each of these outings with him, feeling that she was hiding something. Somehow, my teasing was to blame, and that I should keep my focus on our relationship versus trying to build one that did not exist with someone else. The decision was made that she would go to the 3-day Florida meeting. Florida, Day 1. Physician stopped by her booth first day to ask her out for a drink. Reception started at 5:30. They had drinks and dinner together at restaurant. She was back in room at 10:30 p.m. Day 2. We had another argument that morning, not about physician but about something trivial, but she would not let it drop. He asked her out to dinner that night, drove her to one of the nicer restaurants there. They decided to stay for the fireworks and walk around the park together. Once again, she did not send me any pictures of what she was wearing to go out. It was a fancy restaurant and she likes to dress up when going out. She told me what she wore, and I remember being surprised that she dressed down for a nice restaurant. She wore a long-sleeve linen shirt over a kami. I remember thinking maybe I'm making too much of all of this. If she is dressing down, then it might just be my imagination. Later, I found pictures that he took of her outside the restaurant. It was as she described, but something about the picture didn't seem right. Then as I looked closer, I realized that it is obvious she was braless, and the kami was actually a sheer open lace-back one that she owns that is very sexy. With the temps in Orlando being very warm then, I now believe that is how she dressed for dinner, but put on the linen shirt as a jacket and buttoned it up for the picture. She did not tell me about the pictures, saying she never had any, but these came over automatically from her phone during the photo download. Also, there is a look on her face for these 3 photos that made me wonder. I sent the picture to a woman friend of mine who knows us both and asked her what she saw in the picture, giving her no context. Her first reply was, "Wow, did you both just make love?" Day 3. She was invited by him to a special physician-only reception. She was dressed to kill, finally sent a picture. 5 p.m. reception, they walked to dinner at 7. There was live music. She had a martini. Once or twice a year will she drink anything but wine. I asked if they danced. She said not really, only in a group. Later I found texts by him and her complimenting each other on their dancing, and him saying it is easy to look good dancing when you have Ginger Rogers in your arms. Plus, there was a 2-hour gap in messages when the dancing would have taken place. She was back in her room at 11 p.m. Somewhere in the evening she told him she was happily married. He said then needed to clone her so that he could have one for himself. Day of departure, he texted to ask her to go to lunch before he left. She agreed, even though she knew this was really causing problems between us. After their lunch he drove home, but on the way, he recorded himself singing a love song to her in Spanish, his native language. He also sent other music clips to her of his favorite Spanish artists, pictures from world travel, etc. So, if this was anyone else, I would probably have no question. Having an affair would go against all of her principles and her character. We discussed this at length, with her convincing me that nothing happened. That yes, he must have developed feelings for her, but it was all professional. She also said, the meetings were 85% business and 15% personal. My accounting shows they probably spent about 40 HRS together between the 2 conferences, so that does not ring true to me. Please, no abuse for how I handled this. I beat myself up plenty and do not need any help. I would like to hear if this is obvious or not to others. Her business was a startup business, so sales was more about gaining interest in the business and product. Document that interest to help bring on investors. There was no product at that point to sell, so not really a typical professional sales role like a pharma sales rep, etc. There was continued text dialogue and a few phone conversations after the conferences. There was interest from both her business and him to join the board of directors of the business. However, like many startups, they ran into issues and the talk stalled out while internal business challenges were dealt with. Not sure this really changes opinions, but just clarifying the situation. The relationship has changed over the past couple of years, but we have faced quite a few financial challenges over that time also, on both her side and my side of business. Believe it or not, I sort of forgot about it while we worked hard together to overcome these challenges. Finding the pictures I mentioned sort of brought it all back up to me, and then thinking about how different our relationship is now versus before then made me wonder again about it. Enough to dig back into the text messages and capture a timeline, which I never did before. Looking at the timeline and sequence of events was sobering to say the least. Changes in the relationship, the connection seems less to me. She often sleeps in a back bedroom instead of with me. She says it is because she is a light sleeper and doesn't want me waking her up or her waking me up if she can't sleep, but this was not a problem at the beginning of our relationship. She sometimes goes without a bra with the right outfit when we go out, but dressing for me in those cases. She never flirts or even looks at other men when we are out together. Were the kisses real? Not sure. Hard to believe something turned bigger and longer would still be innocent and closed lip. He was obviously after her and wouldn't be put off that easily. If a woman allows a kiss more than once, then a typical man will take advantage of it. I agree. He was showing her off as a trophy to his doctor friends, and the length of time of each lunch and dinner outing was a big red flag to me. These were not group dinners, but all one-on-one dinners, with the exception of the receptions. I appreciate all the feedback. Any females on here that would give their opinion. They might see things in a different light. Maybe females have already weighed in and I just missed the distinction. Does she lie to me? Never in big things, or at least I believe that was the case, but in small things that are unimportant I will find that she changes the story often to show that she did not make a mistake. It is an odd quirk that I'm now wondering more about. For example, she may something where she clearly made a mistake, like the name of an actor in a film. When corrected, she will immediately say, "I know, that's who I said," or "that's who I meant," versus admitting she was just wrong. It is very rare for her to ever admit she was wrong about something. Happens enough where it is an irritation to me, and others have noticed it also. I chalked it up to more of a personality quirk. Her personality and priorities are very altruistic. Her faith is very important to her and is very genuine. She is consistent in putting time, energy, and money, even when in short supply, in play to help others. She is well liked and admired by virtually everyone who meets her. There was abuse in her life when she was young, and I wondered at times if that triggered a Jekyll and Hyde personality. She is normally very conservative, but then at times can be just the opposite, much braver in public than I would ever imagine or ever could be myself. I'm not talking dirty here, but for example, speaking up in a crowd about something that is very unpopular but she feels passionately about, or trying a new dance in front of a crowd seemingly completely uninhibited. These are probably not the best examples. Need my coffee to kick in. She has had marriage proposals from very wealthy men whom she just met a few years back. How does that happen? One other incident. On a business trip, we were talking on the phone in the evening before turning in. She told me she was going to walk down to the lobby to get a hot tea before bed. I didn't hear back for about an hour. A man who watched her walk by on her way told her to sit with him when she came back. She did, and for the next hour he tried to convince her to go back to his room. When she called, I asked why in the world did you even sit down? Her answer, it was the way he told me to, that she didn't feel she could refuse. I know women can be attracted to authority and power. Is that a trigger here? To be clear, the marriage proposal came before we were married, but shortly after we started dating. She gave a speech at a conference, was approached by the very successful gentleman. Only state that because it seems to be a trend. They chatted. He knew about her from common acquaintance, but first time they ever met. He proposed marriage, telling her that she could have whatever lifestyle she wanted with him. They kissed. She turned him down. He wanted to stay in touch, and I said not possible if we are going to date and get serious, so she ended all communication. I've always wondered how someone, successful and prominent, not a crazy man, would offer marriage on one fairly innocent meeting. Was there more here than I was told at the time? No kids with her. We decided to not do that. I have kids from previous marriage, and there is now no chance of having them. One of the things I really admired about her was how she handled her previous marriage. When her ex found out about the abuse, he lost all interest in her and said he could only see her as his sister now. She went through several years of a loveless marriage and told me that she never cheated, didn't believe in divorce, and was determined to stay faithful to him regardless of how he had checked out of the marriage. He finally asked for a divorce to move on. I thought with that background I had someone I could completely trust. I don't think anything is still going on with him or anyone else. I do snoop on her phone. Sometimes he will send a holiday text that is very professional and she will respond back in kind, then nothing more. If something happened, it is odd that it never comes up in a hint or a "wish I could see you again" type of text. Perhaps he knows not to send anything incriminating to that text number now, but after the conferences he didn't hesitate to use it for the songs, etc. Not sure I should wait and hear. No, I'm not okay with a real kiss, meaning a romantic one. In many cultures, and with many people, a kiss goodbye is common. The girl who cuts my hair usually gives me a peck on the lips when I leave. I have no interest in her nor her in me. So, if that was the extent, then I wasn't too bothered by it. Obviously, with the time spent, the long dinners, and then a quick confession when asked that it was bigger and longer than before, cast it in a new light. At the time, I'm sure I was choosing to ignore it and pretend it was nothing. The marriage proposal guy was a real kiss, not to make excuses, but we only had 1 or 2 dates when this happened and we were not serious yet. On reflection, I wonder now if that was much more than a kiss to get a proposal and also for her to decide he wasn't for her. On the topic of her ex, he seems really messed up to me. He is, from other stories, a very self-centered, uncaring person. It doesn't all make sense to me either. He had a son from a previous marriage that he didn't see for most of his life. When the son got into big trouble with drugs and gangs, my wife took him in when he refused and helped straighten him out, got him through professional school and back on his feet. He had no interest in any of it. Why she married him, I have no idea. I think it stems back to the abuse and self-image. As she said, the man who should have never touched me did, and the man who should have didn't want to. Was there more to the story? I guess there always is. There are no greater lies than the ones we tell ourselves. I was describing the person I know day in and day out over the past few years, which is why it has been hard to reconcile the events that I posted versus the person I watched in action in normal life. I know the evidence is strong, but an affair has not been confirmed yet. Hope that helps convey where my mind was at when I wrote that. I believe this may be the heart of my problem. She once told me that her father would remind her to not share with anyone because they simply wouldn't understand, and she was aware that this had a big influence on her to not fully share things with others that she didn't think they would understand. Her awareness of the impact of what happened to her made me feel comfortable that she had come to terms with it and healed from the wounds. The compartmentalization seems to match what I've been sensing. I don't think I will find anything going on now. She is very open about me picking up her phone to search for something when mine is in the other room, etc. I think my issue may be more when she is traveling or the situation is right and the mood strikes. Thank you for the info though, I will try it regardless. I've been traveling today, just catching back up. Reading both the advice and the abuse. I hold my cards pretty close. I have much more data regarding her emails, accounts, phone, records, etc. than some are presuming. I dig and snoop, and have been for some time. Seeing nothing new or out of the ordinary since that trip left me wondering if bonding happened. But the issues are deeper than just if she cheated on that trip or not. Let me catch up a bit here. I do own at least part of this. The pain is there, but I hide it pretty well. I just went through a business betrayal by a close friend with significant loss of money, so I'm a bit shell-shocked and do not really want to believe she would be capable of doing it and hiding it from me. I already knew before your response that attempting healing was what I need and want to do. You gave me parameters in which to think that through. I thought knowing the truth of the extent of what happened would help me as I tried to figure this whole situation out. No health issues, no IRS or government or legal issues either. The business partner put me into financial challenges, but climbing out of that. I was, however, blindsided by my ex-wife with a divorce and another man in her life which she moved in within a week of my departure. So, I guess I do have a weakness here. Not sure if I'm just too trusting or naive. I've been very successful in my career and have good lifelong friends, except for the old business partner. What does that tell you? Before I confront her, I have a business that I'm trying to run and 2 teenage kids to boot, so life is a bit busy and complicated. In fact, something that I found today in old emails perhaps fits the CSA profile mention. I dug into some old archived PSD files today. There was a man, a doctor, go figure, she worked with before we met who I knew about, but according to her he liked her but she had no interest in him. In the PSD I found emails and pictures that painted a different story, under the guise of pulling old pictures of our history together to put with the rest of our pictures on cloud. I needed her to give me a password for a protected PSD. She could not figure it out, but happened to see other emails and pictures from non-protected PSDs on M computer and opened one. It had a cozy but fairly innocent picture of the 2 of them together. She quickly said nothing ever happened between us, even though I never asked. I then clicked on the thumbnail of another picture that I knew was more telling, them sitting in a booth in a deep embrace and kiss. She quickly said, "Oh, he surprised me with that kiss. I didn't want it and pushed him away." Again, I never asked and even said that was all before us, it shouldn't matter. She stuck to her story even though it would be hard to explain how a very deep kiss with her eyes closed that happened by surprise, just so happened to be captured by a camera and was found in her email. So, we were not a couple when this happened, but why would she feel the need to lie about that to me? I found emails for a few weeks where he would routinely call her his butterbean and a B&B reservation made for a work conference for them, 2 different rooms, where she used a false name and address. So, it was obviously a physical relationship. Why hide that? It should have no bearing on us since we were not together. However, the timing was fairly close to when we first met. Is this a trend of work-related trysts that she just automatically lies about and hides? I'm still seeking to understand. I know some of you will automatically say wake up and smell the coffee. I'm not in denial. I'm just trying to understand this better. She does not need to defend any relationships she had before me, but since we committed to a completely open relationship and honesty with each other, I have to ask, why would you lie about this? I will confront her with this at the time that is best for me and my kids. I agree. I do not think anything new will come out of further discussion. My comment: she married this guy for a reason. Carry the financial load. Conferences equal good time. Body count equals high. I don't want to seem controlling or that I'm invading her privacy. What she did before meeting me is none of my business. NG thinking. PI was the way to go. Hire a PI for the next conference. Or DIY, like a home project that she has you doing around the house. Go to the conference and book a hotel room in the same hotel. Make sure she doesn't see you. See what she's up to. Who's she with? Wear a disguise. Surprise honey. Of course not. That crosses the boundaries of trust. I would have had her vetted before marrying her. But that's me. I think she was basically telling you what was going on in female double talk. She may have actually felt guilty about it. Seems like it was a test. It may have been subconscious on her part. Testing to see if you'd do something. To confront her. To be angry. See if you'd react. Testing your backbone. Don't think it was a random guy who chatted her up with a sad story in the hotel lobby. More like one of her dates. Someone she knew or met. OP, this is what women want. A strong, confident man in their life. They want a leader in life and the bedroom. They want a guy that they respect. While her attraction level in husband was sinking, it was rising for those assertive, seemingly strong random guys at the conferences who were going after what they want. Over time, she will test the random guy to determine whether he is the real deal. Strong, assertive, confident, or a pretender. OP divorced and ran right back into marriage with the same delusional worldview. Classic NG move. Call the first husband. Find out why he dumped her. Instead, the NG believes everything she tells him. Bet she was playing the first husband too. I'd wager on it. Try to understand female nature. You don't understand it. A bonus story too. My husband and I have been separated for about 8 weeks, and he stated that he wants a divorce. For background purposes, I met my husband in 2008 and we got married in 2011, after recovering from a 4-month-long breakup in 2010. In 2012 we had our first child, and ended up having a total of 3 kids in 4 years. This was really rough on me and I gained about 100 pounds through all 3 pregnancies. I've lost weight since, but still need to lose about 50 pounds to get to pre-pregnancy weight. My husband has been a stay-home dad since late 2013. I make most of the money. He gets a small VA disability check, but we also have an investment that makes for some good passive income. This past summer, I could tell something was really bothering my husband. He was very withdrawn, not affectionate, spent lots of time outside or just away from the house. I knew something was wrong and finally confronted him in the beginning of September. He has combat-related PTSD, so my general assumption was that whatever was bothering him had to do with that. After refusing to talk to me for several days, he came out and said he wanted a divorce, and that he liked me but didn't love me. This was unexpected. His main reason seems to be my weight, which I don't actually believe. I was pretty overweight when we very first started dating. I was thin when we got married, but I never stepped foot in the gym until after we were already a couple, and it was something I wanted to do for myself. I went to the gym pretty regularly until I got pregnant and couldn't take the morning sickness, exercise combo. I haven't really been able to get back into exercise with the kids all so young and me working full-time. His other reasons for divorce were that he thought I was controlling, he didn't like anything about me, and thought we had a terrible marriage. It's like he rewrote history. I don't think I am controlling, but I will say that I'm a saver and he's a spender. I never cared about most of his purchases, except when he would spend $1,000 without even discussing with me first. Most of this money came from our investment, so I could understand his desire to just spend it, but he was buying vanity items when we needed a new roof, for example. There were also tax liabilities for spending this money, and it was always difficult to deal with it at tax time. After the divorce talk, he immediately started searching for a new place to live, but I actually ended up being the one to move out. I panicked because the only place he could actually afford to move to was over an hour away, and I didn't have time to find alternate childcare arrangements. My husband did say some really bizarre and crazy stuff in that first week that made me question whether or not the PTSD is the real issue. I can elaborate on this later. I don't want this post too long. He's had a diagnosis since 2012, but never sought treatment. The week after I moved out, my husband told my dad he called a veterans crisis line. He still talks to my dad pretty regularly. It took 6 weeks for my husband to actually get an appointment, and that therapist dumped him after one visit. They told him he needed treatment outside the scope of their expertise and won't see him again. He's still wanting treatment, but it's unclear as to what the next steps are. After the separation, things were really dismal. He was very cold, didn't want me at the house for long, didn't want me touching things in the house. I was a wreck during this time, saying and doing stuff that probably just cemented his decision in his mind. After about a month, I was able to get a hold of myself enough to back off completely, and I'm doing my best to just roll with the situation and appear happy and upbeat whenever I have to see him. Now I don't even know what to make of the situation. We're communicating really well. He's even apologized to me about the situation. He invites me over for kids' activities. He helped the kids celebrate my birthday. We've had laughs and jokes together. He tells me goodnight when I leave the house. He talks to me about various details in his personal life, etc. On the divorce front, he actually agreed to do legal separation instead, but nothing is filed, and it seems the end goal is still divorce. We've been doing the paperwork ourselves and have agreed on just about everything. There was discussion of marriage counseling, which he agreed to, but then said it was just to give me closure. At this point, we haven't gone to counseling, and I'm not planning to bring it up again unless he specifically asks to go. He has his wedding ring tattooed on, and has gotten at least one tattoo removal treatment for it. I've wondered about the possibility of another woman, but have seen little evidence that one exists. My husband's friend did make a comment that my husband was feeling guilty about being attracted to someone else, but if that's the case, my husband doesn't appear to be making any moves. He even disconnected his cell service. So anyways, I'd like to think this situation is salvageable, but I'm also prepared to walk away. I'm trying not to make myself a doormat, but I feel the need to keep things as friendly as possible because of the situation with his PTSD and the fact that he's still the primary caretaker for the kids. I'm not really sure what I should be doing. There's a lot more I have to say about this situation, but this is enough for now. Well, I found out over the weekend that he did cheat, but it was several years ago. It sounds like it was a Craigslist hookup. He refuses to give many details, aside from that he feels extreme guilt about it. I told him I forgave him and he says he doesn't deserve forgiveness and that no other woman would be willing to forgive cheating. He then started crying, gave me a hug, and said he didn't want to hurt me anymore. Later that day, he was back to telling me that he didn't love me and that he was much happier now that we're separated. He said he couldn't handle my mood swings. This is the first time he mentioned mood swings. I left this out earlier, but I've been suffering from bad mood swings for a while. I had this problem early in our relationship, and it went away when I switched birth control. I've been using a hormonal IUD ever since. I started suspecting the IUD was affecting my moods last year, but nobody else seemed to notice. Well, I guess my husband did, but he never said anything until a few days ago. I actually had my IUD removed after we separated, and when he brought up mood swings, I told him I thought my birth control was the cause and that I quit using it. He said that if that were the case, it would be tragic. I later told him that many marriages are able to recover from full-blown affairs. Then, he said, I almost want to say let's get legally separated, but not divorced. We'll keep separate houses. I interrupted his thought to ask what would happen if I got a boyfriend, and he said we could get divorced, and that he didn't really care what we did as long as he could get his ring tattoo removed. So now I'm confused. He's been dead set on divorce. Even though we previously agreed on legal separation, the end goal was always divorce, but now he wants to separate and not divorce. There are advantages to staying legally separated, but he had a counter-argument for just about all of them. Now I'm wondering if he's entertaining the idea that maybe we can recover from this. I really do forgive the cheating, and I think it's frustrating that he can't seem to forgive himself. At this point, I'm a bit on the fence about what I want. If he were to come up to me right now, wanting to reconcile, I'm not sure what I would do. Even though I forgave him for the cheating, the fact that he would put me through all of this bothers me a lot. I actually think he wasn't planning to tell me about the cheating at all. A lot of people were telling me that he must have cheated, so I called his bluff. I flat out told him I knew he cheated, without any evidence, and he confessed. He doesn't want to elaborate on it, but he did tell me that the gal was about 60 pounds heavier than I was. I think that's really interesting considering his issues with the marriage. I asked him if he wanted to get divorced prior to the cheating, and he couldn't give me an answer. His actions have actually been completely contrary to his words, which is why I don't believe him when he says he doesn't love me. Since we separated, he has continued to go out of his way to do nice things for me, and it goes far beyond the scope of what I think a person would do if they were simply feeling guilty. Just this past weekend, I had a plumbing issue, water shooting out of the toilet like a volcano, massive flood, at my new house, and he volunteered to take care of it so I didn't have to miss work. This took up his entire day. I did not ask him to do this or even suggest that I needed help. The only thing I told him was that I was going to be late for our child exchange, because I needed to clean up a flood in my basement. That's when he offered to help. Well, I took him seriously enough when he asked for a divorce that I went out and bought a house. The entire reason legal separation was ever brought up was because it was suggested by my lender. Their advice was not to file divorce while trying to get a mortgage. This was the reason my husband originally agreed to legal separation. But my loan ended up closing before we filed. I later asked my husband why we weren't just going straight for the divorce, once we had no reason to do legal separation, and he said it was because he thought that's what I wanted. I was very surprised the other day when he suggested we not get divorced but stay legally separated. I didn't really touch on this in my original post, but our initial divorce conversation was very bizarre. My husband was talking about his emotions and feelings not being real, that they were all just chemicals in the brain, which, I guess he is right, but he was talking about it in a way that implied that didn't believe what he felt was real. Then it got weird. He told me that when I changed my name back to my maiden name, I would be safe. He said he had a battle to fight and that we would be attacked. I told him I wasn't planning to change my name back, and he got angry. Then he said he never considered that I wouldn't change my name and that he would change his name instead. It was a week or so after this that he called the Veterans Crisis Line. He had one therapy appointment through the VA, but that therapist immediately referred him to a specialist and won't see him again. My husband hasn't said anything particularly strange since then, but his text messages have been very out of character. I thought I was just imagining things, but my dad called me the other day to tell me that my husband had been sending him odd text messages. My husband still keeps in contact with my dad. These messages initially started with my husband using phrases that he's never used before and have evolved to him making statements contrary to what we thought were his deeply held core beliefs. On top of all that, right after I moved out, my husband turned off the heat and hot water to the house and started using the fireplace as his only source of heat. Then he replaced the water heater, but messed with all the plumbing so only the shower has hot water. Everything else only has cold water, including the sinks. He also keeps all the lights off. He says he's doing this to save money on the electric bill, but his brother told me that my husband was turning off the lights at his house too, and that he had to tell him to stop. The only positive is that he seems to be doing a good job caring for the kids. As part of our separation agreement, we divided up a large investment, but my husband is rapidly spending his portion. He's probably spent $30K on vanity items in the last 8 weeks, but he is still being very frugal in other areas of his life. Ever since he admitted to cheating, my husband has been opening up to me more and more. These are in-person conversations, and I just try to listen and validate. He usually talks about what he's been up to, his plans, and his struggles with his PTSD. There's still zero intimacy, and he's still making progress to get his ring tattoo removed, but I feel like we've gotten closer, if that makes sense. Personally, I think the reality of the situation is starting to creep up on my husband. He's struggling to keep up with housework, and the effects of having two households are starting to impact the kids, despite how amicable we are. Our oldest says he is sick every time one parent has to go home, and my husband feels extreme guilt about this. He says it's all his fault. I obviously don't want to guilt my husband back into a relationship, but I definitely feel like he's not as sure as he was in the beginning. I guess I am officially in marital limbo. We were going full speed ahead on getting all our paperwork done and filed, but my husband has been sitting on the last couple of forms for over a month. When I ask about them, he usually tells me he's been busy and will get to them. This is a complete 180 from his attitude at the beginning of our separation. He wanted to file a SAP. At some point, we changed the divorce to a legal separation, but the legal separation agreement is convertible to a divorce, and we remain married while it's in effect. Even if he's having doubts, I see no logical reason to not sign these papers. Coincidentally, I noticed that I sent him these forms the day before his first therapy appointment. Within a day of that appointment, I got the impression that he said something to the therapist about our marriage, but my initial evidence was weak and boiled down to out-of-character text messages my husband was sending. He wanted to know about my emotional well-being and how I was coping with the separation. It wasn't until weeks after therapy that I noticed he also stopped pushing for us to get anything filed. Now I'm kind of at an impasse as to what to do. We did all the paperwork without a lawyer, and the agreement is pretty good for both parties. I'd hate to pay a lawyer just to force him to finish it, but I like the idea of being protected legally, financially, especially if things go south later. As far as our relationship goes, things are still very platonic, but I sense longing from him. I've been doing good by not reacting to him and working on myself. I want to be patient with the situation and see where it goes, but I'm just not sure what I should do about the legal stuff. Like comment, sounds like he got dumped. Perfect time for you to move ahead assertively. What do you guys think of this relationship lesson from the wife's perspective? Comment down below and let me try to upload another one today.